Thom Hartmann, Screwed, The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class, and What We Can Do About It. The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class, and What We Can Do About It, B.K. Currents, Paperback. Venture into the alarming truth behind the steady decline of America's middle class with Thom Hartmann's Screwed, The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class. This gripping summary lays bare the consequences of an interconnected web of unsound policies dating back to the 1980s, which have left the middle class hanging by a thread. Explore the nexus between the decline in union membership, weakened health insurance policies, an increasing wealth gap, and wage stagnation. Hartmann invites readers to question the erosion of democracy caused by the focus on corporate interests and inherited wealth that undermine the values on which America was built. As the heart of American democracy is jeopardized, the book shows the urgent need for revitalizing the middle class and taking a stand against those who want to maintain the status quo.
America's Crisis of the Vanishing Middle Class. The middle class has been under attack since the early 1980s, with a decline in union memberships, a loss of manufacturing jobs, and a drop in defined benefits pension plans. These issues, coupled with a decline in personal and economic freedoms, are pushing people out of the middle class. The founders of the Constitution recognized the importance of a healthy and well-informed middle class, necessary for an effective democracy. Yet today, more families are struggling to make ends meet, with the average CEO's salary skyrocketing, and the minimum wage amounting to less than the poverty line. America's crisis of the vanishing middle class raises important questions about the state of democracy and the future of equality in the country. The battle between democracy and a corporatocracy. The emergence of cons in American politics has caused a decline in middle-class prosperity and a threat to democracy. The cons represent corporate interests and inherited wealth, and their influence has resulted in worsening working conditions and no retirement prospects for American workers. There are two branches of cons: predators and true believers. Predators prioritize themselves, send jobs overseas, and disregard environmental policies. True believers promote elitist government and favor trickle-down economics. President Ronald Reagan's policies of minimal government and minimal taxes on high incomes resulted in history's biggest federal deficit, and his tax cuts for the wealthy did not benefit the middle class. The George W. Bush administration's hidden faith in corporate control brought about cuts in Social Security and Medicare. The cons' interest in corporate power and creeping privatization threatens American democracy. It is up to Americans to choose whether democracy or a corporatocracy will rule the country. Rebuilding the middle class. The middle class can be revived through protective measures for U.S. industries, progressive income tax, and reasonable wages for workers. The government must initiate spending on public projects, which pay decent wages, and improve infrastructure to sustain local communities. The rebuilding process requires tackling commonly held myths such as smaller government equals lower taxes and greater efficiency. The Hurricane Katrina incident is an example that downsized government does not mean more effective governance. Instead, smaller governments tend to work for corporations and inherited wealth. Another myth is that privatization can provide better services than the government. However, public healthcare and social security systems have suffered depletion since privatization, and the privatization of electricity and water utilities has proven to be costly to consumers and the environment. The government should prioritize public welfare over profit-making and refute the agenda of corporatocracy, making it a conducive environment for reviving a robust middle-class economy. The role of economic policy in shaping the middle class. The modern middle class was established through the New Deal policies of FDR, which included Social Security, fair labor laws, antitrust enforcement, business regulation, and a progressive income tax. These policies laid the foundation for the middle class's best days, from 1940 to 1980. However, since the cons view the middle class differently, their attitude has hampered its growth. By keeping workers on a knife edge, they attempt to control the cost of labor, thus violating the founders' view of business as subservient to the government. Their approach has led to conflicts with the government, which regulates the markets to ensure that free marketers do not evade regulations. However, the modern cons view taxes as undemocratic and portray them as a form of theft, thus violating the embedded social contract that taxes pay for essential infrastructure and national services that everyone needs. Reagan called government help counterproductive, but every citizen benefits from government policies, and their approach has only left soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorder, a depleted uranium-contaminated Middle East, and a few dozen fat cats in the defense industry. Thus, it is necessary to handle economic policy with care, as it determines whether the economy benefits billionaires or the rest of us. The threat to America's middle class. The middle class in America is facing a financial threat due to rising healthcare costs, poor upward mobility, and corporate greed. This threat can be attributed to the policies of conservative governments over the past 25 years. Healthcare costs, once managed by nonprofits, surged after Reagan deregulated the industry. Poor upward mobility has caused a decline in real earnings for college graduates while the wealthiest Americans experience income growth. Conservative policies propose lower taxes for corporations despite the fact that businesses use more public services than individuals. To avoid a monopolistic corporatocracy, laws were created in the past to separate corporate interests from government interests, but corporations have infiltrated the government to the point where they have more influence than the middle class. The middle class must be aware of these threats to their economic well-being to ensure a prosperous future. The Corporatocracy of Iraq. The presence of 30,000 U.S. private contractors in Iraq has led to the privatization of mission-critical military work that was once the sole responsibility of the military. Private corporations such as Halliburton and Bechtel pay their contractors up to 6 times more than what a U.S. Army private earns, and working for such corporations is a tempting option for U.S. soldiers once they leave the military. The federal government has hired 730,000 new contractors, but their jobs often remain unclear, especially in Iraq, where they aren't obliged to report to the military. This privatization creeps into managing prisons, schools, and voting. People cannot audit privately owned electronic voting machines, which can compromise the integrity of elections. The author proposes several solutions to counter this trend: increasing wages, rebuilding organized labor, advocating for workplace rights, supporting a single-payer healthcare system, preserving Social Security, charging corporations a 35% tax, and taxing the wealthiest individuals at 70%. Americans must elect officials who value the middle class, whose preservation is critical to sustaining democracy.
Scrooge shines a light on the devastating effect of decades-long policies that have undermined the middle class, the backbone of American democracy. Fueled by corporate interests, deregulation, and a focus on inherited wealth, these policies have left the middle class reeling, struggling with increased economic burden and dwindling Social Security. Thom Hartmann delves into the ideas and actions of founding fathers, such as Jefferson and Madison, to understand their intent in creating a society balanced with personal and economic freedoms. Rediscovering these democratic values becomes central to reviving the middle class and restoring America's solid foundation. The reader is left with a clear understanding of the importance of an empowered middle class and a call to action in demanding accountability, equity, and fair governance.